Good morning for everyone that's joining us. We're going to give it just a couple moments to allow everybody to hop on the link, and then we'll get started at about 8:02. Good morning, Mayor. We love that chat box. So thank you, Mayor, for welcoming everybody this morning. Feel free to say hello and introduce yourself in the chat box as you're jumping in. It's always fun for others to see who's on the call with them. So we're going to give it about 30 more seconds to allow people to hop on. Good morning to everybody that's joining us. All right, well, good morning and welcome, Chamber members and guests. My name is Cami Welch, and I have the privilege of serving as the president of the Arvada Chamber of Commerce. We're so grateful that you've joined us this morning for our March Community Impact Forum on community growth. We recognize that this conversation is a really critical one for our community, and certainly one that there's not a shortage of discussion around what it should look like, when it's going to happen, and we know it affects both residents and businesses. So we're excited to be discussing this today and getting a better baseline understanding of what growth is going to look like and the various challenges associated with it. This topic we realize could be a full day summit about community growth, and we have challenged our presenters today with packing a whole lot into an hour, and we know it's a lot to digest. So we have kind of tackled this at the 15,000 foot view. So we know there's more detail and questions that would come up, and we're committed to helping to answer those as the forum ends and we move forward with an FAQ. Before we get started today, I'd like to take a moment to thank and recognize our elected officials and dignitaries who have joined us today. I realize that via Zoom, sometimes it's a bit tricky because sometimes people can sneak in. So if I miss you, please don't be shy about letting me know, and I'd love to recognize you. We do have our Mayor, Mark Williams, with us today. From the Arvada City Council, we have Mayor Pro Tem Dot Miller, John Marriott, Lauren Simpson, and Nancy Ford. From Congressman Perlmutter's office, we have Ashley Verville. Senator Rachel Zinzinger has joined us. Arvada Fire Board, Bob Loveridge, Fire Chief Mike Piper, County Commissioner Tracy Kraft Tharp. And I'd also encourage, because I know we have an election this fall, if any candidates have joined us this morning, please feel free to put your name in the chat so we can welcome and recognize you as well. We would also be remiss if we didn't take a moment to thank all of our incredible sponsors that make these events and many other things that the Chamber does possible. So on the screen, you can see all of our sponsors up there. Again, we're so grateful for their commitment and support of the Arvada Chamber of Commerce. As always, there's a lot going on here at the Chamber, and so a couple quick updates for you to be aware of. We are thrilled to be continuing our Badass Women of Arvada campaign through the end of March. We've recognized many outstanding women with many more to come. So please check our website and Facebook to see who has been selected so far. We are doing our business boot camp coming up here in April. If you visit the Arvada Chamber website, you'll find out more about that 12-week program that helps your business grow and thrive. For those of you that haven't found it yet, we did launch a podcast this year, which we're really excited about. It's called the WIN podcast. That stands for What's Important Now. So we're tackling issues like legislative policy changes, HR changes, to make sure that you're in the know and your business can continue to thrive. I would also love to invite all of you to join us for our Topgolf Tee-Off here in a few weeks on April 9th. This is going to be a fun network building event to reconnect with some of those that we haven't seen in a while. So we hope you can join us for that exciting event. And then finally, just planting the seed that as we're preparing for our awards events, which as you know have been pushed back to later in the year, we will be releasing our Business of the Year and Man and Woman of the Year nominations here in the next week. So please keep an eye out for those so we can get you all plugged in as appropriate. It is now my pleasure to introduce today's event moderator, Michael McCarran, to kick off our discussion. Michael currently serves as the Arvada Chamber Advocacy Caps Council Chair and is the owner of Lakeside Insurance. Thank you, Michael. Please take it away.
All right. Good morning. Welcome, everyone. Happy Friday. It's a pleasure to join you for such an important topic for the city. We have a lot of great speakers and ground to cover today. It's my job to make sure that we get to all of it and we do it in a timely manner. We'll go through a series of challenges that we face related to growth to set the context for this discussion. As a friendly reminder, we love when you activate the chat box with positivity and collaboration. Additionally, we have the Q&A box open and encourage you to place any questions in there as well. We have a full agenda today, but we'll work to get answers to your questions after today's event as well. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome our panel for today. Ryan Stachelski, Director of Community and Economic Development. Maureen Fair, Executive Director of Arvada Urban Renewal Association. Lori Rosendahl, CEO of Foothills Regional Housing. Daniel Riley, Executive Director of Arvada Economic Development Association. To start us off today, we have Ryan to paint the picture of where Arvada is today and what growth looks like. Ryan?
Thanks so much, Michael. Good morning, panelists, and thanks for being here. As Ryan with the Chamber switches us over to another PowerPoint, I'll just lay the groundwork. This first little segment is going to be talking about what growth looks like until build out. So Arvada is a mature community and that we are largely built out, but not 100% built out. So where are we today and where are we going? And that's the first segment that we're gonna talk about. Go ahead and hit the next slide, Ryan. Next slide again. So just to lay the groundwork of where we are, these are some fun facts, some basic demographics in Arvada. Our current population as of 2019 was 20,500. The census data has not been out yet. It'll come out later this year in the June-July timeframe. The current number of households that we have in Arvada is approximately 48,000. And you'll see why this is going to be an important number to know as well as the population in a minute. And then average household size is 2.5 folks. There's an interesting fact that 62% of the households in Arvada only have one or two people in it. And then the percentage of households that are multifamily versus single family is 21%. I point those out now, but Maureen Fair is going to go in a little bit more depth on how they're relevant and how they kind of impact what the future of Arvada is going to look like. Go ahead to the next slide. So as a little just fun game for everybody, if you want to throw it in the chat, we wanted to ask the question, in which decade did Arvada have the most population growth? So go ahead in the chat, and I'm going to open up the chat to see what people are saying. Feel free to take a couple of guesses of which decade you think it is. I see the 60s, the 1990s, there's one for the 70s. Yep, 70, 85. So if we go ahead to the next slide, we'll be able to see the answer. So there it is, 1970s is when we had the most growth. We had the most growth. So just awareness and context. I know that we have a lot of longtime residents, a lot of new residents that are all seeing change. And this puts some in context when we had population change. Go ahead to the next slide. Another fun fact, and just kind of getting your bearings around, you know, and this will be important for when we think about where we're going with build out. Currently, the total amount of square footage that we have in Arvada is about 13 million. And that's getting broken down into 3 different categories. So about 6 million for retail, 5.2 million for office, and about 1.6 million relative to industrial. Next slide, please. So here's another fun fact question. How many square feet of commercial is there in Old Town? So go ahead, throw that in the chat again, and we'll see what people are thinking. Michael McCarron's guessing too, multitasking there, good job. Okay, well, we can go ahead to the next slide. You guys keep guessing. The correct answer is 225,000 square feet. It's just a point of interest. As we were talking about commercial development, it's helpful to think about relative size and what does that mean? A couple other fun facts related to that is that Old Town Arvada, and I'm talking about Old Town Arvada sort of proper, is about 27 acres. And then the other interesting context for that is if you go from Old Town to Newtown, Newtown is the area that we call from basically the movie theater down to Sam's Club over to Costco that incorporates all that commercial development. There's about 1.2 million square feet of commercial space in that area, and that's about 130 acres, just to give you some context. Go ahead to the next slide. So what does build out look like? And so right now in our comprehensive plan, we consider to be full build out at 153,000 folks. And so from today's population to that population in a date sometime in the future, maybe 25 or 30 years from now, depending on what happens, that's an increase of about 33,000 more people. Additionally, we have a total build out number of somewhere around 61,000 households. You'll remember that our starting point, or our point where we are currently, was around 48,000. So that's roughly about 13,000 more households, with keeping roughly the average number of folks in those households. And then the last area is, so in order to service those new residents and those new households, keeping the proportionality roughly the same, we would increase from about 13 million square feet in commercial space to 16.8 roughly million square feet of commercial space. That's about an increase of 3.5 million. Now, remember, I just mentioned that the Newtown area is roughly 130 acres and 1.2 million square feet. So when you think about new commercial development, you're talking about land area in a space that's roughly double what we're talking about in Newtown. So think about where that could be, think about what redevelopment looks like, think about what density looks like. And over in the right-hand box, I just have a couple of questions to think about. So when you think about the number of new residents and the number of new households that will be here when we transfer from where we are today to full build out, how many of these units will be affordable? What types of businesses are going to fill this next 3.6 million square feet of commercial space? And how much of that will be market driven versus community driven? And so some of our next speakers are going to talk to how they are shaping business development, residential development, and affecting how the market is building things in Arvada, and how the community's input also drives where we're going. So I'll land there and we'll go over to Maureen.
Wow, that's a lot of great information. I'm a numbers guy, and so that speaks to me, Ryan, so I appreciate that. Next, we'll move on to Ms. Maureen Fair to help us better understand the demographics that are leading to some of the decisions around residential and commercial redevelopment projects. Go for it, Maureen. Mute, please. Ms. Maureen.
Oh, sorry. Thanks, Michael. I'm going to talk to you this morning about redeveloping infill sites. But before we get into that, I want to expand on the demographics that Ryan shared and how these are driving Aura's projects. Next slide. So I always think it's meaningful to look at demographics compared to the other cities in the metro area. So on this slide, you can see that compared to the 7 other large suburbs, that we are older. Next slide. I always think that this is surprising. So this shows that our households, that 62% of our households have only 1 or 2 people living in them. Next slide. So where are these 1 and 2 people living? They are primarily living in single family houses. So you can see also that even though it seems like we've been building a whole lot of apartments lately, we actually are pretty low on the numbers compared to the rest of the metro area for multifamily. Next slide. Love this slide. This shows that we are a fairly affluent city. But with that being said, there are still some of our community that are struggling to pay for their housing. 25% of homeowners are considered cost burdened, and 51% of our renters are considered cost burdened. And Lori later will be getting into that. Okay, next slide. Okay, so as Ryan had mentioned, with build out of Arvada approaching, the focus is going to have to turn to redeveloping these infill sites. So Aura has been doing this for the last numerous years, and we have a great case study to share with you on redeveloping these infill sites. So next slide. Next slide, there you go. So this is a great graphic or aerial. This is from 2015. This is that shopping area at Ralston Road and Independence. This area has been in decline for years. There was a vacant Safeway. There's now a vacant Kmart. And the shopping centers to the south and the strip center to the north were really struggling. So next slide. So we have been working on this area, like I said, for years. So when complete, the commercial square footage will be cut in half, a trend that we're seeing across the country as retail contracts. With the exception of Walmart, all the commercial is small, service-oriented retail and restaurants. Next slide. So keeping in mind that 62% of our households are made up of 1 and 2 people, and that we're low in multifamily, we are now looking to introduce 772 housing units. So I want to go over this relatively quickly because I'm always told I talk too long. So pay attention. We're going to start on the left side and we're going to move fast. Okay, so where you see number 10. Number 10 is 64 for sale wee cottages, basically kind of tiny homes. Moving over to number 9, this is the former Kmart site. This is going to be 386 apartments and 10,500 square feet of commercial. 15 of those units are going to be affordable. Going over to number 2, that is the shops at Ralston Creek. That's where we have several fast casual restaurants and a lot of service businesses. Number 3, that will be 44 for sale townhomes. They're going to be breaking ground on that project later this month. And number 6, that is 27 townhomes. Number 4, that will be 186 apartments. Number 5 is really quite exciting. We love this one. This is going to be a big plaza, kind of an active plaza with restaurants that are going to spill out onto it. And we're going to try to keep those for local and regional restaurants. Number 8, that will be 100 affordable housing units. And number 7 is also another exciting project. That is going to be this vertical park that's going to connect the area to the south, to the north. Okay, next slide. So as we move towards redeveloping these these infill sites, we need to be aware that redevelopment is really hard and very expensive because the land, we're not building on a green field. So you're buying improved property with buildings and infrastructure existing. Also, the land that you're acquiring, you may have to assemble several parcels. And these parcels oftentimes come with existing tenants. So those tenants either have to be bought out or relocated. And a lot of these older properties come with a lot of environmental contamination. They have asbestos, they have dry cleaning contamination, they have former gas stations on them. And so all of this has to be dealt with and replaced, and that infrastructure. So you need all new utilities, all new water, everything. So as we go forward, just keep in mind that as we approach build out and the focus becomes on infill, that is going to take a lot. And with that, Michael, I am done. And I think I made it in my 10 minutes.
Wow, I've got you at 6 minutes, 20 seconds, and I put you on the clock, Maureen, because I was concerned. Well done.
Yeah, smart man.
All
Thanks,
right.
everybody.
I think that gives us all a better understanding, the challenges, infill, where do we put, how do we redevelop, where do we put new development, and some of the demographic and challenges associated with that growth and build out. Let's talk specifically about our housing mix and why it's so challenging to secure attainable housing. To guide us through this conversation, we have Lori Rosendahl. Lori?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time to hear me on affordable housing. I think most of you know I could talk for hours about it, so I will be very brief. The next slide, please. The first slide I want to share with you is something that I share far and wide. This is just data from the Metro Denver Vacancy Rent and Rent Report. This is fourth quarter data, and it clearly shows that just to live in Jefferson County alone, you need to earn $28.22 and not be rent burdened. And I want you, when you look at this data, to keep in mind that this is just for apartments. It doesn't include any single family homes. For some of our larger families who really need that single family home, or some of our folks that maybe don't do well in apartment living, they're just priced completely out of the market. But for our apartment folks, this is your vacancy rates. Usually a 5% vacancy rate is a healthy market. The problem with our market, even though we're close to a 5% market, is our average monthly rent is pretty high. And this is just a basic single apartment. This is nothing fancy. These are just all of the vacant apartments. Take data taken from apartments in Jeffco. And you'll see it's $28.22 an hour just to live in Jefferson County. And you can see how that compares to everyone else. We steadily just keep climbing and getting closer and closer to those other communities. One thing I will mention is that your average teacher starting salary, and I just looked it up on Jeffco's website this morning to make sure that I had good numbers. Master's degree starting teacher starts at $22 an hour. So they're priced. They're out. If they're on their own, they can't afford just a modest apartment. So if we can go to the next slide, please. This just breaks down the data a little further by city, and you can see where Arvada is in that mix. You're pretty high. You're at the top end of the market, and so it's tough to live in Arvada. And when I talk about the 5% vacancy rate, I looked at the numbers, and a lot of those vacancies are in the higher end, more expensive units. Most of your lower rent units are full. And I think you guys know that. So next slide, please. This is just to give you a little bit of data on what the supply is right now of affordable housing in Arvada. Right now, there's 539 income-based apartments. So income-based apartments are where your rent slides up and down with your rent, with your income. So if you lose your job, your rent goes down. You make more money, your rent goes up. You have 539 of those right now, which sounds like a lot, but it's not, because that type of housing is slowly disappearing. And I'll talk more about that when we get into talking about preservation. Low rent apartments are more like your low income housing tax credit. Those are affordable units that have set rents. The rents do not slide, but there's 1,011 of those in your community. And next slide, please. So one of the things I just want to add, because I think we always forget about this when we talk about affordable housing and we look at numbers and we look at units, what we have to remember is that in many of your market rate complexes, you have folks living in what could be considered affordable housing because it is subsidized with a housing choice voucher. And housing choice vouchers, while they're really hard to get, there's usually long waiting lists. We've received some new allocations recently. They're always special populations. So, non-elderly, disabled, foster youth, family unification, those kind of vouchers. But just to give you an idea of how much money is being infused into local communities, and I did not break this out for Arvada specifically, but this is Jeffco. And you can see that Metro West Housing has a $12 million annual budget authority, and that's how much they're spending in Jefferson County, and they can lease about 1,111 households. And then Arvada Housing Authority has about 508 units awarded. They can lease 455. When I say that difference, it's because of the funding that comes with it. We don't receive enough funding to lease all of our units, which is a problem we've been working on with Congress for a very long time. So their budget authority is 4.9 million, and that's going out into the community. And then we have about 1,750 units, and we can lease about 1,450. And our budget authorities, it's now, I just checked for 2020, and we were at about $18 million. So $18 million that we're infusing into the rental market to private landlords so that folks can live affordably. We have some new vouchers coming out, VASH, which is Veterans Affairs Supported Housing vouchers. Those are, we just got 10 new vouchers there. Foster youth, we've got 30 foster youth leased. And then non-elderly disabled, we have 140 of those just in the last couple of years. And then I know Arvada has 30 of those. So some good news on the voucher front. There is some movement. It's slow. It's really targeted. But for a long time, the voucher program didn't add new units. And so, if you have market rate development going on, and I'm constantly reaching out to market rate developers saying, hey, will you set aside some units for my voucher holders? Because they could really use them. And I've had a little bit of luck. It's not, always easy because the amount we can pay is not the amount they can get on the market. But if they're having a hard time renting them, sometimes they'll rent to our families. And they can't discriminate now based on income. So they can't say, well, we just won't take vouchers. But what oftentimes happens is the rent is just too high and it doesn't meet our voucher guidelines. So next slide, please. So I want to be really clear. I'm not advocating for any of these. I'm not telling Arvada that this is what you need to do, and I'm not saying I support any of these. I'm just giving you some ideas of what's been done in other communities and some of the things I've been hearing out and about. So support affordable housing. I mean, I think this is an easy one for what Arvada can do and what other communities are already doing. Support affordable housing with existing resources. Arvada is already really good about doing this. I want to tell you, I'm developing a 100-unit complex in Arvada right now, and I have felt very supported. They have been, when we went to city council, when we've been before city staff, it's been all positive. So it's been great. I really appreciate that about Arvada. But what we would ask all communities to do, and Jefferson County is really good about this as well, support us with your CDBG funds. When we go to develop, when anybody goes to develop, even a private developer goes to develop an affordable housing community, they're going to have about a 10 to 20% gap. If everything goes well and they're lucky and they get their tax credits and they get their bond cap, or they get whatever they need, whatever type of project they're doing, they're almost always going to have a 10 to 20% cap or gap. And we ask our local communities to step up and help us with that. And Jefferson County has been such a savior for us Because what it also does is when you go into CHAP or you go to any other funding source, if you can show them that you have local support, it makes your project much more viable and much more competitive. So support us with your private activity bonds, with waivers. I'll give you a quick example. Allison Village, the project we're developing now near Old Town, we have private activity bonds coming from the city of Wheat Ridge, city of Arvada, city of Golden, and Jefferson County. That's how much it took just to put together the pieces that we needed to get the matching private activity bonds for our 4% credits. So that's just the private activity bonds. All the funding sources together, including us, because we brought almost $3 million to the deal ourselves, we're talking 8 to 9 different funding sources. So it's really complex. Affordable housing is, and building it is complex. So anytime a city supports us, it's great. Some of the things that you can do, create a housing trust fund. I know a lot of communities have done that. There's communities all over the United States. I could give you some examples. I won't do that right now, but you can do that. You can fund affordable housing via bond elections, and some cities that have done that. Austin just recently did that, and from what I understand, it's working really well. So you might want to check that out. You can offer tax incentives or breaks for inclusion of affordable housing in new developments. I think the city of Denver does it. They do theirs a little different. I think it's via a fee. And so if they don't want to include it, they can pay a fee. But I know that Minnesota, St. Paul has been doing some of that, and Anaheim just started a new program. And I think it seems to be working pretty well for them. Relax zoning and development rules. I would add here that's great, and you can do that, and it does help us, especially when you're working with us on parking, especially when we're building a community that maybe has a special population that we know not 2 family members have a car. So if we can work on parking, that helps us a lot. Educate your community about affordable housing, what it is, what it looks like now. The days of public housing and Cabrini Green and those are gone. Most people don't even know which project is ours or which community is ours versus, a market property. So just work with us on that. I think that is huge. And what I found when we came forward with the Allison community, it's working because people weren't concerned. People were excited. So engage big business. This is another one that a lot of communities are doing. You've heard the Amazons in Washington, D.C., etc. Also, the other one is revitalize neighborhoods and preserve existing affordable housing. This is something that is starting to bubble up in Jeffco, and there's some concerns about it. There's a lot of affordable housing out there, some that have subsidy contracts that are expiring. Those could go the way of market rate housing and could end up becoming market housing, and we lose our affordability. We also want to keep an eye on all of those, and CHAPA has a special person who's constantly watching that, and so that's great, but I think cities need to also keep an eye. And then just regular market rate affordable housing. We've got to keep an eye on that it doesn't become out of reach for the families who live there or the families who want to live in that neighborhood. I think that's my last slide. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Lori. If anybody's unaware, Lori threw a shout out to Cabrini Green. That's south side of Chicago. And I actually put on a soccer camp there for kids when I was much younger. Anyway, yeah, great context, obviously multifaceted, and it's a challenge to get private development of attainable housing. And there's a reason it just doesn't happen naturally when you have to go to a lot of different funding sources, when you can easily, make as much or more money, building higher end residences, higher rent. So thank you for breaking that down for us. Next, we'll hear from Maureen, Daniel, and Ryan on what type of development makes sense for Arvada. Cammy wants to know, I believe, why we can't get a Trader Joe's somewhere in the Arvada area, and others always tend to bring that up. So kick it off, guys.
So I'm going to kick this off first, but before we go to the next slide, I just want to kind of dovetail in a little bit about what Arvada has been doing from an affordable housing perspective, ways to get involved, and acknowledging some of the challenges that Lori identified, but also some of the ways that I think that Arvada is able to help move forward. So number one, a lot of the concepts and ideas that Lori brought up at the end, the timing couldn't be better, because actually on Monday night, we are having a housing strategy workshop with the city council. So that's where we've been doing our research and understanding about what's the appropriate way for Arvada to look at housing overall. And our housing authority is going to be presenting their report to City Council on Monday night. So tune in to City Council on Monday night for that workshop. Another thing, as many of the folks on this call know, we have recently updated our land development code. And in that, we have looked at affordable housing and made some specific considerations. The two most notable ways that our current new land code helps support affordable housing, that is, if you are building affordable housing in a mixed use area, we defined affordable housing as using a low income housing tax credit voucher or tax credit, then you can get what we call a density bonus, which is adding another story. So if you had 45 feet as a use by right for that land use, then you could add another 15 feet on to get another story. Recently at City Council this past Monday night, there was a project like that at 52nd and Marshall, where the developer asked for approval of a conditional use permit that intends to use a LIHTC credit, and therefore could get the additional height bonus. So those types of activities are going on as we speak in Arvada. We also have modifications to our parking standards as well for affordable housing. So we are incrementally making progress and having a community conversation around what types of support we can lend to the development of affordable housing in Arvada. Next slide. So what I wanted to talk about real quickly is that all of this doesn't happen by accident or in reaction to, that we're not waiting for developments to come to us, that we are talking to developers based on what we believe the community's vision is. And this starts a long time before a site is available or whatnot. It starts with community planning and long-range planning as it relates to an overall comprehensive plan of what we do in the city. And so that's a land use plan, but it's also other policy decisions as it relates to parks and open space and transportation and all sorts of other community amenities that we think about when we're talking about building a community and creating quality of life. And so that long-range planning starts, and then when we get economic development involved, their job is to implement the community's vision. So their job is not necessarily to just go out and say, well, whatever somebody's interested in Arvada, we're going to find a space for you. We're going to say, whoever's interested in Arvada, we're going to find a way of how that fits into the community so that we can continue to make Arvada special and unique and Arvada. Then it goes into the development review process, where we align the community's vision of what the development standard should be. So things like architecture or setbacks and all the things that need or related to the land development code that people need to follow. Then the project is built, and then AIDA And Arvada Economic Development continues to be involved because they are in charge of the business retention and relationships with those businesses that we are able to attract. And so there's a really nice spectrum of starting with community vision and having it go through the process and making sure that it all aligns together, and then we're finally just supporting the businesses to make sure that they can thrive here. Next slide. Daniel's going to talk a little bit about their role and how they attract various businesses, including trying to get a Trader Joe's.
Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate it. And thanks everyone for your time this morning. I'm happy to be here. Again, my name is Daniel Riley, Executive Director of Arvada Economic Development Association. And yeah, just wanted to kind of round out the conversation a bit pertaining to growth and housing, and really how that interfaces with economic development, and also talk about some of the things that are going on in our city right now from a commercial development standpoint. But just to kind of go back to Cammie's question about Trader Joe's, this is something we hear all the time in economic development. We asked the community. In fact, we just did a survey out to the business community, asking folks who live in Arvada what specific, open-ended question, what specific business would you want to see? And by far and away, it was Trader Joe's. It's no surprise to us, but it's just kind of a fascinating case study because it's something that we're consciously aware of pretty much on a daily basis within the work we do, but yet we still don't have a Trader Joe's here in Arvada. And so just want to share a little bit about some of the reasons why different businesses may or may not choose to enter into a community or build a new facility somewhere. And we can use Trader Joe's as an example. And Ryan mentioned in the last slide that part of the economic development team's role is to really go out and market the community and market the vision of Arvada to the private sector as a place where they may want to invest, and really position Arvada by communicating the competitive advantages and the strengths that we have to support business, because business looks at the whole world now as one big equation of what I like to refer to as opportunity cost. Businesses can be successful in many different places, but they want to be in the best place where they're the most successful. If they're going to make an investment, they're going to take a pretty significant risk in opening up a business or a store somewhere. They want to make very sure that that particular location is the best positioned location and the lowest risk for their success. And so when we think about a company like Trader Joe's, we live in a very, very data and information driven age at this point in time. And businesses, and especially corporate businesses, are incredibly sophisticated with how they analyze and assess every decision that they make. And real estate is no different for them. They understand to this very specific individual who their customer is, who their perfect customer is, and what the perfect location is to get as many perfect customers as they can. And what I mean by that is they're looking at situations in which the people who are more likely to come in and spend the most money in their stores, when we think about retail, they're very attuned to this data, and they analyze it constantly. And so for something like Trader Joe's, they're automatically going to just run and crunch numbers about a community. They're going to look at our demographics, who these people are that live in a community, where they tend to shop, what their competitors look like, how much buying power is in that particular household, how much density of families are able to shop, and how often they might come to shop, how much traffic is driving by, and how many people can see their store or their sign, and patterns of life as well. They're looking at where do people go before they come to Trader Joe's, and where do people go after they go to Trader Joe's. And if you can kind of jumble all that data together, you can pretty easily map out across the whole country where the most ideal sites for a particular investment are. And just leading up to today, Arvada just hasn't checked all those boxes for Trader Joe's. And there are other dynamics that might come into play over time too, as maybe particular parcels of real estate become available or become unavailable. that might change the way that a company like Trader Joe's is looking at the community. Secondly, Trader Joe's knows that we want them. That's another part of our role in economic development, as I mentioned, is to go out and market our community to users that the community wants, as well as facilitate a soft landing for businesses that are interested in doing business here in Arvada. So there's no doubt that Trader Joe's knows how much Arvada wants a Trader Joe's. They hear it from their customers, they hear it from us, they hear it from everywhere, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's just a decision that they're going to make because we want it badly enough or because we love them so much. We could tell our story all day, but again, they're looking at our particular community versus the competitive advantages of a million other communities around the US or the world that maybe is a better place for that investment at that particular time. And along the same lines, Arvada also has its own dynamics that make it attractive for other businesses. So while it might not be a Trader Joe's, it might be a competitor of Trader Joe's who has a little bit different model or looks at things a little bit differently and sees that opportunity cost as being highest in Arvada, and they're actively pursuing getting into our community. And that engages us in a different process, which is how do we actually find the space for them to land, and what's the most ideal piece of real estate that could be available or become available that could actually position a business that is interested in being in Arvada. Another thing to remember is that real estate is controlled privately by whoever owns that real estate. Now, the city has guidelines, as Ryan mentioned, around what can be done, what kind of fits into various boxes, but ultimately who controls that real estate is whoever owns it. They can decide to build on it if it meets the land development code standards. They can sell it to somebody else who wants to build on it, or they could just leave it vacant forever and kind of perpetually pay taxes on it. So that's something that we need to remember too. A lot of people think that the city can somehow act in maybe a Sim City modulator where we can go out and just pick and choose. We're going to put a Trader Joe's here, and we're going to put a Whole Foods there, and then we're going to put this, office complex here. We have to position our community as attractive for the folks who own the real estate and the folks who want to invest in that real estate to actually come together and want to develop something special. And again, timing is a big part of that. As I mentioned, conditions change in Arvada, real estate changes hands, infrastructure gets built, the land development code gets updated, but also corporate goals change. Trader Joe's today might say these specific communities are where we want to be, and tomorrow they might have a different vision and a different model. They might want to make micro stores, or they might go fully online. So you just never know what corporate private sector goals are going to actually drive consumer behavior or respond to changing consumer behavior that might come back and influence our ability to kind of compete for those types of projects. So next slide. I think we can keep kind of rolling on this subject a little bit. So talking just a little bit about what's going on in the community and what is interested in Arvada. There is a great tool that the city has built, and I just love this tool so much. I think it's a best practice. Every community across the country should have it. We call it our story map. If maybe Ryan or I'll pop it into the chat box, a link when I'm done talking here. And I know that Ryan's going to touch base on this later, but that's a place where the city is basically communicating out everything that's going on that is of public knowledge. It's publicly out there for consumption, which includes public hearings that are going on, active development applications, and things that are under construction. So you can look at that by project, or if you're just driving by and you see dirt moving, you say, what is that? You can just look at the map and you can zoom in on that piece of the map and kind of click on a little flag that will tell you all about that project and what's available for public consumption. And so just moving through the city is some things you might have seen going on. Northwest Arvada, we're seeing some great activity up there. Whisper Village is coming online. There's going to be some new retail and services and food services there. And then out at Candelas, you've probably seen the Freedom Street Food Hall going under construction, which is in that southwest corner of the King Soopers parking lot. So that's really exciting. That's going to bring a very nice bar and a lot of food stall stations, a very traditional kind of food hall concept like you might see at Union Station, down into Candelas, where that community will be able to enjoy all those amenities. Moving further south on the west side, we have Tower Place. You've seen some construction going on there. There's a Goddard School opening up, which you'll see like a lot of active construction projects going on there. And right across the street is kind of a glorified man cave type of development where folks can go in and use the space to tinker, or they can start small businesses and entrepreneurial activities in those kind of unique warehousing spaces. And then as we kind of move a little bit further to the east, awesome project for Arvada is called Mountain Gateway. It's about 120,000 square feet of Class A industrial, which is really just employment generation. And we're seeing that activity already. As soon as that development came online, it's being flooded with interest of users that are in the advanced manufacturing or logistics space, energy, aerospace, that want to come in and fill that space with their operations and their employees. So that's really exciting. And then of course, Old Town, we're seeing a lot of activity there. And this is a really great success story. Just think about what we've come through on the pandemic side. We've had a few businesses turn over, but we've had backfilling of those spaces almost immediately. And so some of the things you might see coming up soon are some taco places, some Latin food inspired concepts. We have Cochino Taco coming into the 4-barrel site. We have Tio Cali Kitchen coming into the former Griff's site. And then we have Perdita Kitchen coming into the former Klein site, which is managed by the group that also does homegrown tap and dough. So we're really excited about all the continued activity throughout the pandemic that we're seeing. There's just a few examples. Again, check out that story map link. That's going to be the best tool, your best friend for all your neighbors who are saying, hey, what's going on over here? And you can say, I have an answer for that. And you click on the link and you can find out exactly what's going on. So with that, I think I'll turn it back over to either Ryan or Maureen temporarily. Can you move this up?
I'll grab it, Daniel. Thank you. I love that link too. I think that's one of the most impressive things that I've seen come out. So whoever was behind the visioning and development of that, I send that link out to people when they ask me questions all the time. What a great tool. And I think it is a best practice. All right. I think we'll go Ryan, Maureen, kind of the final thoughts to wrap this up, other barriers to investment in Arvada.
Actually, sorry, I might have one more slide. I apologize. On the other side of this orange one here.
Go get it, Daniel.
Yeah, so barriers to new commercial real estate. So this is just going back to that Trader Joe's slide, but some of the very specific things, as I mentioned, why a business might choose or not choose to be here. The biggest driver is their customers in their market. Are they close to customers? If it's retail, are they close to people? How many people? Is there enough customers to support that activity? Or if they're business to business, are they close to their market? Are they able to buy and sell into the supply chains that they are working within? And then I would say almost tied with customers is the human resources, which again is people, whether it's customers or people working for that company. They're looking for a place where they are confident they're going to find enough variety and talent to support their growth and their initiatives, their goals. Infrastructure is a big part of it. We're going to talk about that in the next slide with Ryan, but where does the utilities play into the development opportunities, whether it's water, power, fiber optics, roads and access? All of those things are key factors in decision making. Site conditions and costs is really the specific parcel. A lot of parcels are burdened by floodplain barriers or environmental cleanup barriers, or they're just really far away from the utilities that I just mentioned. And it's really costly to bring those utilities into the site to provide access for customers and employees. And then also, and this is something I think Arvada is absolutely stellar, and I'll brag on our city, but the local business climate and the regulatory environment. If businesses don't feel like the community has their back and that they're going to be fighting an uphill battle the whole way, they're not going to want to be there. But if you have a community like Arvada who meets those businesses where they are and says, how can we help facilitate? How can we add value and support your goals? How can we align our goals together with the goals of the business and the goals of the community? And make sure that we're removing barriers to your investment and removing barriers to your success, we are able to attract those businesses, and we have those businesses calling us on a daily basis. And in all of these these bullets I just mentioned, there are tools that we help to overcome those specific barriers or gaps. And that's kind of what we focus on in the economic development realm. So with that, I'll go ahead and, sorry, I jumped the gun, but I'll turn it over to Ryan.
Go ahead on the next slide. And this is going to be our last slide of the presentation, although I'm sure we'll, in the remaining time, be happy to answer questions or whatever Cami has on store for us. But what I want to talk about is it's really exciting to think about the future. It's really exciting to think about, you know, what could happen and what types of different things that are going to add to our quality of life and the fabric of our community. But also one of the things that we hear while we're going through the development process is are we prepared for it? It's one thing to say you're going to bring new housing, you're going to bring new commercial development or those types of things. But what makes people nervous is, do we have the infrastructure that will allow us to accept this and truly increase quality of life and not diminish quality of life because we're being overburdened with more things, but don't have the infrastructure to support it. And what I want to share with everybody is that the city takes this very seriously, and that this is part of the natural work that we're doing throughout the city day in and day out. So while you may see me or Daniel doing things related to community and economic development and talking about projects coming through, the rest of the city is working on making sure that we have the services that are needed in order to be able that we can meet the demands and the needs of not just future residents and future businesses, but our current residents. So how do we do that? And the number one thing that we do, and we do a lot of, is we do master planning. We do water master planning, stormwater, sewer. We do master planning around streets, street maintenance, parks, open space, trails. We have a master plan for everything. And it's all connected and it all ties together. And then it goes through the comprehensive plan. And eventually it ties to what the city council's strategic plan is. So the city council sets that strategic vision for us, and all of our master plans flow from that so that we're aligned and we're looking at it not just for today, but we're prepared for the future. We have, I believe at last count, about 52 master plans that we follow and track and that we organize together to make sure that they're connected and aligned and lead up to that city council vision. I put a couple of bullet points in here of, so what are the limiting factors for growth and the future? I struggled with when I wrote like limiting factors. These aren't limiting factors. These are considerations that we need to make sure that we're ahead of, so that when we get questions about growth and we get questions about things coming, are we able to meet those needs? Water supply is one that's ongoing. And fortunately, with our investment in Gross Reservoir, we do have the water supply that's needed for full build out. Water treatment capacity. So it's one thing to have the water supply, but can you turn it from raw water into potable water? And that's something that we're continually working on and looking at the investments that we need to be making in our water treatment plants and our pipes and getting it to the right places in the city. And so we are working on that. Same with wastewater capacity. Transportation is always an incredibly important conversation. And fortunately, we're making those appropriate investments into places like 72nd Avenue and Ralston Road. But making lots of other investments in our transportation and trail system, really looking into last mile connectivity around the various transit hubs and trying to be able to connect those with alternative forms of transportation as well. And then I don't want to forget the other really important city services that we provide. It's not just about pipes and water and roads, but it's also about the police services, the fire services that we're able to provide, and the other amenities that make Arvada special. And so all of these are constantly being considered, so that we're not just thinking about the end user or the housing development, but we're thinking about our investment in all these services that are needed in order to make those things successful. So with that, I'm going to close and turn it over to Michael.
Maureen, did you have anything in closing?
No, I'm good, sir.
All right. So well, thank you, Daniel, Ryan, Maureen. Cammie, did we want to jump in any Q&A? I know the Indiana project percolated up, but I know we're kind of doing a high level. I didn't know if we were diving into specific projects or if there's any commentary to move there. Cammie?
So what I would offer is if either Daniel or Ryan want to give a 30-second update on Project Indiana as to where you think things are, just for the sake of this, and then I will commit to, we're in conversations with those partners as well about doing a podcast about that project. And so we're hoping to be able to share some more information that way.
Sure, let me just give 20 seconds. So the Project Indiana, in which we can now name the project, is an Amazon last mile distribution center that is being considered in West Arvada near 66th in Indiana, kind of opposite of where the city fleet maintenance facility is and where the current bus barn is for Jeffco Public Schools. That project is in the review process. It would need to go to public hearing for annexation and rezoning of some of the lots that then would be consolidated. There is a City of Arvada page, Project Indiana, on our arvada.org that has all the information about what that project is, what the site plan looks like. We are going to be soon uploading an FAQ that Amazon is answering all the questions from a neighborhood meeting that was held on March 11th. There is a recording of that neighborhood meeting on that Project Indiana page. I will warn you now, it's 5 hours long, so get some popcorn. But it's a good meeting and a lot of questions were answered, and it will go to the Planning Commission on April 20th. And so that's where it is on the process. Nothing has been approved, and it is still being reviewed, but you can get all the information on that Project Indiana page.
Great. Thank you, Ryan. Daniel, did you have anything, or are we good?
No, I think I've said enough for folks today, so appreciate it, again, the opportunity.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Ryan, Lori, Maureen, and Daniel. Arvada is lucky to have your leadership and thoughtful approach at the helm. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to the Chamber staff to assist you in getting answers. With that, we are done on this Friday morning. We hope you can join us next month for our county update with Jefferson and Adams County managers. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great weekend.